Hey YouTube, it's Justin, aka Demonic Sweaters, here with another electronic drum video. Today we're going to be taking a look at this Avatar PD705. Sometimes these are also known by the company HXW. And these things are kind of like a Lisa sample pad or a Roland spd-sx, I think that's what they're called, type thing. You know, they have like multiple drum pads on them and trigger inputs and switch inputs and all kinds of stuff. And you can import your own samples. You can play the built-in drum sounds on it. It's actually a really, really cool device. But let's go ahead and get started on it. I'm going to unbox and just do a full, thorough test and demo with this thing. But before we do, make sure you follow me on Spotify or Apple Music using the links down below. Demonic Sweaters is available on all streaming services, or you can go to my record label, anthillrecordings.bandcamp.com, and support me by purchasing a CD or downloading something from there. Anyway, let's go ahead and get on with this video. All right, let's open this thing up. It's actually a little smaller than I thought it would be. Looks like it's probably the power adapter. And yes, it is. Looks like it's got a multi-region plug there. And it just came with my correct one for USA. There's the drum pad sampler manual, and this could be pretty cool. Open it up. Decent packaging. And the only other pad that I have right now is the Drumcat DK10, which is actually a bit larger than this, but this looks pretty nice. All right, let's talk about this thing. This PD705 percussion pad by Avatar. Now, I am pretty impressed with this. My first impressions are overall very, very good, especially for the price. I had a lot of fun playing with it there. Now, of course, it's not perfect. There's a couple of things that I noticed when I was setting it up. First off, let me just show you guys how I have this thing hooked up and what I did, what you just saw there. I'm using a Roland KD7 kick drum trigger and a Roland FD7 hi-hat controller plugged into the foot switch 1 input on the back and the trigger input 1 for the bass drum. Now, the one thing that I noticed that is really strange is for some reason when you plug a kick drum trigger into that trigger 1 input, it triggers a hi-hat sound by default. And I have no idea why they would do that. The foot switch number 2 input triggers a kick drum sound, but I don't want to use a foot switch for my kick drum. I want to use, a kick drum trigger. Foot switch for hi-hats. So anyway, but you can fix that basically just by going in here. Let me just show you real quick. In the menu, and just go to Wave, and you can hit your kick drum there, and then you can select your sound by just using the scroll knob here. That being said, I had to create I would probably have done this anyways, but I created a full custom kit, what you heard there, and just wrote over the number 1 setting in here. And another criticism is there's no save button. There's an OK button, but it's kind of unclear about how this works. Like if I press it right now, see, it'll say save successfully. However, in some menus, OK works like select. And select, well, let me just show you what I mean. Like if we go here to, let's go into effect, okay, and then here you would think select would select our different effects, but you can't get down into that menu unless you press OK. So there we can press OK, and then we get into the menu for the effect. But then if you press OK again, it saves. So it's a little weird getting used to the way the buttons function, but it is, you can figure it out. Like if you just play with it a little bit, it's kind of similar to a Roland menu system, but there's no exit button. And I'd be okay with no save if it were like Roland style and it just saved by itself if it had an exit button. But, again, you can figure all this stuff out. You can get back to the main menu just by pressing Kit right there. It does have some pretty good editing editing features, rather. You can edit effects, you can do tuning, you can do muffling, you can do pan, you can do pad modes. In addition to editing the sounds, it does have a fair amount of pad editing functions. So as you can see there, if we just press setup, it goes to MIDI, and that allows us to select our MIDI note. And all you have to do is just hit the pad you want to change. You can select your MIDI note. So you can see that all right there, and you could, easily select your MIDI note for the kick drum. And I thought maybe if I would change that to the kick drum, which is 36, it would change the samples, but it doesn't. So it doesn't change the internal samples if you select a different MIDI note for your pad. But like I said before, you can just edit it to get a kick drum on your kick drum trigger if you're using one like I am. If you're not using a kick drum trigger and you're using a switch, then it should be fine out of the box. Or if you're just, if you just plan on using the pad, this pad right here defaults to a kick drum, so you can use that, as is out of the box too. Now, once you're in the setup menu, you use this up and down arrow to get to the different parts of the menu, and then you use the select button to select the different parts of that submenu. So, as you can see here, we have our standard sensitivity, threshold, and velocity type. There's also some pad settings here. You can select single or dual zone triggers, and then there's also a firmware version right here. You can do a full factory reset, and then an update right here as well. And you probably need to download something from the internet to do the update. So the menu, like I said, it's a little bit not the most user-friendly menu, but it's really not that bad. I mean, I guess it's no worse than anything. You just have to get used to it. Now let's take a look at the back. All right, on the back of the device, we have the headphone output, master volume. main outs left and right. Have an auxiliary input. There's MIDI input and output, as well as USB-A, which is where you can load things onto the device, such as samples and other, firmware and things like that. B allows you to connect the device through USB MIDI. Then we have 2 foot switch inputs as well as 2 trigger inputs, but the trigger inputs actually can be 4 trigger inputs if you split them, which is actually really nice. So you could actually have 4 external triggers hooked up to this thing, giving you a pretty complete electronic drum set with some extra triggers. Like I have a kick drum here, but you could even add like an external snare drum. You could have a snare drum down here. You could have maybe like a ride cymbal over here and a kick drum. And you could have a 2-zone snare, ride cymbal, and a kick drum if you had a single zone ride, and use those 4 inputs. But that'd be pretty neat. You could really do some additions to this thing. Plus you have the ability to use 2 different foot switches. Just gives you a lot of options. It's pretty nice. All right, so the first thing you're probably going to want to do is actually update the firmware on the PD705. The reason being is the new version of the firmware allows you to load your own samples onto the device without having to use their software, which is the Wave Manager software that you see right here. In the past, before version 4, you used to have to use this software, which really added no extra benefit. It was just an extra step you had to go through to get your own samples onto the device. But now, since this new firmware update, supposedly, I haven't tried it yet, but supposedly once you have this, you can just drag and drop onto a USB stick. So I'm going to go ahead and download this, and we're going to install it and see how it goes. So, all right, so next we're just going to go to wherever you downloaded the firmware and then unzip that. So I'm just going to right click it and extract files. And click OK. And now we have a folder here. And inside of here, this file right here, this bin file, that's the firmware. So that's what we're going to want to copy over to our USB stick. All right, so let's just go ahead and right click this, click copy, go into our USB folder here, and paste it in here. And next, we just have to unplug this from the computer and then plug it into the PD705. All right, so let's go ahead and take the USB stick and plug it into the back of the Avatar. Turn it on. All right, so once you have your USB plugged in with the firmware on it, just go ahead and press Setup. And then we're gonna push the down arrow until we get down to the bottom menu here, which says Update. And then I'm just going to press OK to update the firmware. And the firmware should be on the root, which means not inside any folder, just on the root of the USB drive. So let's go ahead and press OK. And now it's extracting. And then it'll take a few minutes to update, and once it updates, it should restart on its own. Then after that, we should be able to basically drag wave files onto a USB stick and then copy them right onto the Avatar. And make sure you don't accidentally unplug it or turn it off while it's updating, because that could probably destroy the device. So just let it finish, and then now it's finally done. All right, so now what we're going to do is copy some samples from my computer to USB and then use the USB to put them on the device. So what you need to do first is, once you have your USB plugged in, mine is right here, it's just called empty, just create a folder in there called pad_wave. And this is where you're going to put all your files, all your sample files. So basically what I did is I just went into Audacity and recorded a couple of samples with just using my mouth into the microphone. And the thing is, you have to follow a couple of guidelines for the samples that you import. And those are right here. So first off, we already created our directory, which is called pad_wave. All the samples have to be .wave files. They should be 16-bit signed mono samples, and the sample rate is 48,000 hertz. Now, that's all easy to do in a program like Audacity or basically any recording program, but you can set all of those parameters within Audacity. So just make sure all your samples have these parameters and they should work just fine. Make sure that the total amount of samples that you're trying to import doesn't exceed the amount of available storage on the PD705, which I believe is 64 gigabytes, I think. But it's quite a lot, so you have a lot of space in there to import things. It only does .waves. There's no MIDI or MP3s or anything like that that you can use. And yeah, so let's go ahead and take this USB and put it in the PD705 and import some samples. Okay, just make sure the PD705 is not turned on when you plug in and unplug the USB. I found that it seems to have trouble reading it if you do that, at least for me. It could be that I'm using these really crappy Micro Center USB sticks. Might have something to do with it too, but just to be on the safe side, I would just make sure it's off before you plug in the USB. So let's turn it on. So what you're going to do to access the USB menu is actually hold down Setup and OK at the same time. And now you can see we're in the USB menu. All right, so once you're in the USB menu, you're just going to use the down arrows and go down to Load. And then you're going to, if we use our Select button, you'll notice that it goes through the different things we can load. But what we're going for here is Kit. There's no way to load individual samples. You basically just have to load them all at once, at least from the USB onto the device. Once you have them on the device, then you can load them on individual kits. So let's go ahead and press OK. And now we're going to press Select to go to Cover. And I know that's some strange wording, but what that means is we're overwriting the user samples that are in there right now. And since I don't have any, that's okay. You could also append and add to the user samples, but we're going to go ahead and Cover. Press OK, and now it imported all of those. So it's going to restart once it imports all the waves. Now what we can do is, let's say we're here on Rock Kit. Hopefully you guys can hear that. I don't have it super loud, but... So let's go ahead and change this gong here, or whatever that is I have selected. So let's go down to Wave. Now if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, we'll see our samples that we imported. So there's Crash Mouth. And that's how we do it. Alright, that's going to be all for today's video, everybody. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it and learned something. What did you think about the Avatar PD705? I actually think it's pretty nice. I'll probably end up using this, and actually I might end up replacing my drum cat because it's just a little bit easier to use. It's a little more compact, and the fact that it's not a MIDI controller, it has built-in sounds where you can load your own sounds, and you can use it as a MIDI controller if you like. And plus it has USB and hardware MIDI in and out on it. Another thing I forgot to mention, it actually has a spot on the bottom where you can screw in a standard electronic drum mounting plate. So you can mount this easily to a stand next to your drums, or just in general, just to be able to mount it on a stand and play it how I was playing it earlier, even though I was just using a standard snare stand when I was playing it. But anyway, I think it's a really great piece of gear, and it's definitely worth the money. It's one of the most affordable ones out there, and I didn't have any problems with it as far as triggering. I didn't get any mistriggers, any double triggers, anything like that. It was 100% accurate the entire time I was using it, which is actually pretty darn impressive for a unit this cheap. So anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click that bell icon so you get notified every time I upload new content. And don't forget to check out Demonic Sweaters at anthillrecordings.bandcamp.com, as well as on Spotify and Apple Music, or wherever you stream your music. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody, and have a great day. Take care.